The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and a diversity educator. I am honored to be able to feature guests every week that represent or bring to my attention and the rest of us some other aspect of diversity or a social justice issue or a climate solution issue. And today I named this show, What is June to You? Because as I was thinking about this, I was anticipating June and feeling so happy and excited about graduations and celebrations and Father's Day and summer solstice, and that love the longer days, which we're still enjoying. And Juneteenth, which I've learned so much by attending just a couple of years worth of Juneteenth activities that Sandy Holman and the YOLO Library near me and UC Davis have organized, in highly educational, great information, commemorating the even though it was nearly 2 years after Abraham Lincoln emancipated enslaved African Americans, before the Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, with the news of the emancipation. It's wonderful to learn more about our history in America. And so Juneteenth is a big deal to me now, which I really appreciate. And as I was thinking about, what does June mean to you, I thought it'd be so wonderful to talk to a recent graduate. And my goodness, my dear friend Sandy Holman put me in touch with a great recent graduate who is my guest today. And Tushani, let me see if I pronounce this right, Gunaratna, thank you for being here. Please bring her out while I read a little bit about her bio. Thank you again for coming. And you're a recent graduate of political science, gender, sexuality, and women's studies at UC Davis, and also a research assistant at the UC Davis Feminist Research Institute, which I'd love to hear about. And I know you were an intern at the Culture Co-op with Sandy Holman, and that you aim to build toward a more just, sustainable, and loving future, which I greatly appreciate. So thank you. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me, and you pronounced it perfectly.
I love that. I love the name, and I love learning new names. And my name is Lebanese. Both my first and my last. And I don't know if you would like to share where your name is from. It'd be interesting to know if you feel like sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I think my name is really important to me. So I'm Sri Lankan, and my name was actually a combination of my mom, my grandma, and an astrologer, and my aunt, if I haven't named her already. And it was in coordination with looking at my charts and determining what letters would be lucky for me. So my name holds a lot of deep historical and cultural value to me. So yeah, that's some of the origin for my name.
Wow, that is wonderful to hear that so much thought was put into that you're being named.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I know when I met Dushani online a while ago when I was watching a Zoom art exhibit that was just incredible. And there you read one of your poems. And today, I'm grateful you're going to read a reflection, and we will start off that way and then go into, more conversation. So do you want to start with reading your reflection now?
Yeah, I
Or
would
do
love
you
to. So, just a little bit of context. I was writing an autoethnography about a year ago, and this is an untitled piece from the autoethnography, and it reads, I wonder why we sometimes cling to our beliefs, even when learning we may be wrong or when confronted with details that complicate our initial perspective. I wonder why we dig our feet into stances we have vague skeletal reasons for holding, why we enter conversational spaces with the sole desire to spotlight correctness or lack thereof. How do we expand our ability to listen and embed a sense of grace, giving way to shifting, changing, and growing? How do we get to a place where we can listen to each other without feeling as if we are on trial and without pressuring life's complexities into simplistic binaries? Good versus bad, right versus wrong, speaking versus listening, me versus you. What if we changed the language of opposition to join these words, to address and validate the gray spaces that lie between and beyond? My ummi pulls the dough, coating it with oil and rolling it into neat circles. She packs them with triangles of chili, mackerel, potato, and onion filling, stretching the dough over and tossing them into the pan to crisp. I ask to try, and she takes my hand, and we knead the dough to the pulse of the love that travels through our interlocked fingers. She patiently guides me and laughs with me in the space of failed trials and the cultivation of knowledge and skill. In the space where the steam of the LOL roti captures the scent of nurture and patience.
Wow, that is beautiful. Oh my gosh, the image of a mother and a daughter rolling the dough the why are we taking these opposing stances? It definitely points to your goal of aiming towards a more just and loving world.
Thank you. Yeah, my intentions with this piece was to kind of give an implicit solution or to shed light on the importance of seeing a togetherness, that interconnectedness and unity, but also, yeah, all of that stemming from a place of love and seeing how something as simple as making food could also be radical and revolutionary in a sense.
Nice. Radical. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your studies, because it's interesting. I mean, double majors, not easy. It's kind of double the work. And I mean, I can guess why you chose those two fields, but tell us about how you are integrated political science and gender and sexuality and women's studies.
Yeah. So I have two older siblings. My brother graduated with a political science degree, and out of admiration for my family and seeing the necessity, especially in recent years, of being politically active in knowing our histories and being conscious and aware, I decided to pursue my political science degree. And in taking a lot of classes, it didn't feel like it was enough. And I kind of fell into my women's studies major just by chance and by gut feeling. And it's something that has supported me. And I think the coordination of these two majors was really beautiful because I would say my gender, sexuality, and women's studies major, it's a mouthful to say, but it cultivated the love, the collaboration, the liberation, the healing, all of these words and concepts. And political science kind of laid the roadmap for how our society operates. So in seeing both of these majors, I was able to understand how I could enact these profound ideas of how we could truly be equitable in our society. And that's something that I feel my political science major was lacking, that perspective that I think was honestly devalued in a lot of it, just coming from this idea that there has to be a class or there has to be a group that's marginalized almost, at least was the premise for some of my classes.
Mhm. That's interesting. Like that capitalism depends upon having a class system. It's just a thought that comes to my mind when you said that. Do you want to add? Can you add more to that, please?
Of course, yeah. I think in my political science classes, especially in conversations surrounding democracy, we see capitalism almost as a necessity. Obviously, there's theories and studies debating the extent to which and if that's even so, but that tended to be a conclusion, and I felt kind of in tension with that observation or that analysis, especially in reading through Black feminist literature and learning about how capitalism confines us and it creates this competitiveness. And in a lot of ways, political science stems from this. Not all of it, of course, because I don't want to generalize, but it was time and time again hearing about this view of the world as a state of anarchy and
Mhm.
seeing the worst in people and seeing things from a very masculine, patriarchal, cisgender, heterosexual way. And then I come into my gender studies degree and I see that maybe it shouldn't be like this, even though a lot of these theories are normalizing it.
That's interesting. I was thinking about how there it'd be nice if we found a model, because I do think there's some great things about capitalism, and so many times I've felt like grateful to like be able to, like, when I was younger and had to raise money, I set up a baking business. Like my family had Lebanese restaurants. And just like the ease with which we could become entrepreneur, like for me, for someone who's, you know, a native speaker of English, who has the privilege of white skin, and I know it's not easy for a lot of people, but there's such a balance, and there's just so much to learn. And I was not in economics. I did not study economics. I studied a little political science, but it's such an interesting question about. So educate me more about what can more of the what striving for equitable systems and institutionalizing them, and just any thoughts you have or any learnings you drew upon how to incorporate that into a system that is still male dominant and is still dominated by white supremacy. So, like, tell us more. and yeah, even about the literature you read, which is such a good way to learn through other people's experiences. And
I completely agree. And I 100% consider myself a student, and I think I will for the entirety of my life because there's so much to learn. But
yeah,
my understanding as of now is that there's multiple approaches. And I think whether you go from a lens of either major, it's going to be a lot of debate. And for me, I see value in, I guess, approaching from multiple directions, taking that multidisciplinary approach, because I've had conversations within my friend groups, within just various circles where people believe that you have to infiltrate those quote unquote toxic spaces. And then there are other people thinking that it's necessary to have a group that supports your vision. And I don't know what the answer is. And I don't know whether one is better than the other. I think it's a combination of understanding the individual impact, but also the importance of policies and legislations, and maybe not stopping there, but changing our systems and our structures, because you can't, I believe there's a saying where you can't exactly expect a sick system to care for you. Like you can try and treat it And I do believe that a lot of people believe in our systems that exist, but to what degree can they help us if they weren't built for us in the first place?
That's really well put. And yeah, clearly, there's all the kind of tension and opposition and political strife between groups of people, and the divisions would indicate the system is sick and not well. And then it's so interesting to think of it in terms of how can it be taking care of us. And also, I also feel like I notice and appreciate the things that are in place that do help lift people up. Although certainly not enough, certainly not everybody, and we still have, we still keep the people on the margins, for sure. We meaning the main system and power.
Mhm. I also appreciate you highlighting that too, because all of that isn't to say that the work we do to alleviate the harm within our systems is invalid or not necessary or not important. I really do believe that that should continue and is extremely important, especially for the immediate effects and a relief, of course.
Yeah. Wait, I hear the gratitude in your voice and in your words that you too notice and appreciate things are going well. So it'd be interesting to talk about. I know one thing I asked you in advance, a couple of 2 or 3 topics you would like to bring into our conversation, and this might be a good time to ask you about maybe your own experience and your views on exclusivity and inclusivity in academia.
Yeah, with respect to that, I was thinking about the elitism, the vocabulary, and often the disconnect between academia, research, and what's going on at the front lines, what's going on in daily lives, and how oftentimes the people in research don't represent the people that they're researching.
Yeah.
So that was something that I really wanted to talk about as I take on research positions, as I move through higher education. And I noticed that sometimes there are groups of researchers where I can't exactly find my experiences or my identities within them. And I wonder how that sculpts their research. And of course, there is protocol, there are values, there are ethics that researchers take, but just also knowing that qualitative research is often devalued and quantitative is held on this pedestal has been a concern of mine, seeing how, for example, autoethnographies aren't necessarily considered real research by a lot of people, unfortunately, but I would argue that it's incredibly enduring and exhaustive work to look at yourself, to understand and how you fit into society, into your community, and to understand the impact of systems and structures on your life experiences, to see how history informs the way that you act and how
Mm.
power dynamics and all of this play into your reality.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great point. I just had a flashback to when I studied decades ago, when you talked about the disconnect between the researchers, the people researching, and the people they are researching, the researcher and the researched. Yeah, maybe it was idealistic of me to think perhaps, I'm sure we've moved a little bit. But it also makes me, I really, really appreciate what you're saying, and sad that disconnect is still so clear and strong and evident. And I'm happy you are in research yourself right now, and you will bring a new kind of researching lens that will connect and be more connected, because that is Yes, I'm just thinking about all, you know, so many assumptions and projections that happen and keep casting people into characterization by an outsider who doesn't even know what the experience is like. There's something so wrong about that.
Yeah.
Can you define? It would be helpful. What an autoethnologies are. Like, can you explain that? Because you've spoken about it very, very well, but can you just sort of deepen our understanding of why that's important and what it adds in the qualitative to the qualitative realm that's still not given enough weight yet in curriculums?
Of course. So it's essentially looking at your memories and your experiences and understanding them with relation to theory. So for me, that meant at the time understanding my experiences in relation to the different intersectional feminist theories I was reading. So, one person that stands out to me is Patricia Hill Collins, who wrote A Black Feminist Thought. And I was thinking a lot about how she mentioned we should have coalition building and speak across perceived lines of difference. And I feel like that key word right there is perceived lines of difference, because I grew up thinking that, of course, safe spaces are necessary, but then with social media, you wonder to what degree we're in echo chambers and we're not actually hearing one another, and we're not realizing that, yes, we have distinct experiences and our stories should be told because the details matter, but what about the patterns? Because when you see the patterns, it unfolds the parallels, because we're all being subjected to that same system and ideology of domination, of being treated as we're lesser than because of race, gender, sexuality, class, country of origin, skin color. The list goes on, and everyone is affected in one way or another. But to go back to your question, so I think an autoethnography is picking apart how you fit into that mosaic, to that the puzzle of theory of life, and thinking critically and understanding things relationally.
Relationally. We don't hear that enough yet. Understanding things relationally. Thank you. And you can always add more, but I'm also just thinking about how what you would like to say about the stereotype and the pressure of the model minority, and if you had that experience yourself, and just whatever you want to share about that.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the theme of what this month means to us. And in graduating and identifying as a South Asian person, I felt that I wasn't as excited that I had hoped I would be. And in unpacking my feelings within the past few weeks, it's only been maybe 2 weeks since I've graduated, but it feels like much longer just because of not having school. But in thinking about that, I realized that it's the pressure of these positive stereotypes. Throughout my life, I've been expected to have the best grades, to be the smartest in the room, to be submissive, to be quiet, to keep my head down, but to ultimately get things done. And though I consider myself accomplished, I don't consider myself accomplished because I do well in school. I think it's because of the values I hold and the values I try to lead with in my life. And graduation, in a sense, didn't feel celebratory for me because of getting the degree, because I do believe I learned so much within my majors, but in also knowing and recognizing that higher education and formal education has a lot of biases and things that you aren't told still, it didn't feel, again, as celebratory. So I feel like there were many layers for me in thinking about my identity and feeling like I don't fit up to what is expected of me. And then also thinking about how much higher education is praised. And I do believe it is a huge accomplishment, but at the same time, there's so many different layers to it and so many things to unpack on that institutional level.
Wow. I'm just taking that all in. Yeah, that's something to have had that experience of graduation, and yes, this is great. This was hard earned. The degrees are important. It matters. There's a learning and reading and learning, and then also yet experiencing, it's not the hugest celebration that I would like, or a full celebration, because I'm also very aware of the limitations and the biases and the unconscious awareness probably of so many of our teachers still, so many of our things still in place that don't bring out everyone's brilliance and don't support full actualization, because our institutions aren't there yet.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, that makes me want to ask you, I know you just graduated 2 weeks ago. I'm not saying, I'm trying to resist saying, I'm not really saying, what are you doing next? What I want to know is what's your vision? Because it could take years and years and years and years to actualize. But I am curious, what's your vision of, I guess both how, what you could celebrate, and how to get there, and how you're going to use your insights, your knowledge, your drive, your passion to help make that happen. That's a lot. I'm asking a lot of questions in one. Take your time.
The first thing that comes to mind is ensuring that all of those things you mentioned are are built into the career I have. And it's honestly a struggle, because you have to play the game of capitalism in order to survive, in order to have access to basic necessities. And in a lot of ways, that's stifling, because fields that you think would be incredibly life-changing and do create immense changes also have their limitations in operating within the system of capitalism. So I feel those pressures, and I know that I can't place the work of transformative justice into my career and my career alone. And in that sense, I've given myself a lot of leeway, and I just hope to have it be a guiding principle in terms of the work culture and the work impact as much as I can help it. So I hope to fine-tune my interests in writing, hopefully go into the direction of nonprofit work and participate in grant writing or blog writing, and also be at the front lines again and provide the services to uplift marginalized people and support them, and envision and imagine and work towards those futures of hope and joy and prosperity for us all. And yeah, I think that's the starting point for me, looking at nonprofit or government work where I can feel like I can begin to do that work, but then know that I have to extend beyond.
I'm just kind of curious. I'm surprised. My questions are usually big and broad, like the previous questions, but I'm just thinking, when you mentioned government, what would be a government role in the U.S. government, whether it's local, state, or national? What's a government role that you feel like you could possibly, that could help promote transformative justice? Even in areas of housing, or I'm just curious, does any particular role come, President of the United States or any other role come to your mind?
I think
Senator.
it's so interesting because I wish I would have the yes answers, but I feel like I have more no answers where I'm going through the processes and I'm feeling so much confliction. And I feel like that just highlights a lot of the issues that I've learned within my classes, that it's
Mm,
yeah, just being a human being, you experience the hypocrisy, the contradiction of walking through our societies, of being a human again. And I I know that politics are influential, and that's something that I'm deeply considering. But then you also know how corrupt they are. Like just being a voting citizen and seeing the day to day, knowing how theatrical it can be, and how oftentimes the optics seem to matter more than the actual work. So I think as of now, I don't have a decisive answer to it because I'm figuring it out with you. And
sure.
it's a lot of looking and seeing what's there because unfortunately, I don't think my education told me a lot about the specific roles. It was more so general fields. And now I'm doing the work of weeding out the specific jobs and boxing in the ones that have potential.
Yes, absolutely understandable. And I apologize for asking these questions to someone who graduated 2 weeks ago. Um, I mean, oh my gosh, it's incredible. Just hearing your answers they're still. I'm still very impressed by your thinking. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing as in your assisting in research right now? Can you share? Can you share what you can about that? And also after that, I would love to hear about your internship with the Culture Co-op and what the Culture Co-op's all about.
I would love to share for both of those. I think they're both wonderful spaces and have been life changing, life altering for me. And to lead with the Feminist Research Institute, unfortunately, my contract will expire since I've graduated, and that's why I'm seeking full time employment. But I work with them to provide support to this group, the Feminist Health Justice Collective, and they have developed this database. It's really a meta syllabus in terms of its purpose and functionality, but we call it a database in a sense to kind of make it more familiar. And the work is to have this repository, this collection of resources that bridge health and intersectional feminist theory. So the scholars, the faculty, and the students that helped develop this project drew inspiration from the public syllabi that were circulating around 2020, with the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's turned into this big project, again, a database, and I'm building upon it. I manage the database in terms of conducting literature searches and reviews and populating it. And the work is incredibly fulfilling. I learned so much about health, and it, I guess, to reiterate, but then also reframe the purpose is to address the upstream determinants of health. So, understanding different health topics as they relate to social identities, to systems and structures, because oftentimes health can be isolated from those and understood as an individual body experience instead of as something that's manifesting due to the interconnectedness of human beings with their society and their systems and their structures.
Wow, that sounds really good. So, in lay terms, it's like a database of resources
Yes.
that will, with lots of good like information and points of view that can help us understand how our health issues are impacted by our identities, including like where we live. And I mean, one thing that's coming to my mind is like environmental racism and placement of your neighborhood, your zip code, and all the health disparities. Am I getting the right picture?
That's correct. It's exactly that, just understanding those crucial relationships. And I think I read something just the other day about how asthma and common allergies manifest in certain racial groups and class groups more than others. And that points again to how, race and class sculpt, well,
Mm.
due to the systems and structures again. So, like how our society operates, oftentimes you see marginalized populations living in the worst areas, and then they contract these health issues. And it's not accidental, it's completely an intentional way of policies, of histories. And that's something that health needs to address, the fact that you're not just by chance contracting these things, that the stress of going through racism actually affects your body. So seeing examples like that and spotlighting them and collecting all of these articles, all of these accessible resources, because the database goes beyond scholarly articles. It has videos, it has podcasts, because we want to make sure that it's accessible. So it has multiple means of learning and that it's not just academic literature.
That's fantastic, because that would just academic literature excludes a lot of people. Not necessarily easy to access for a lot of people. That's great. Podcast videos, articles. Wow, what a great project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm well known, like when I lead trainings, I often start by defining terms of, so I would love to, can you just sort of break down a, a definition of what intersectional feminist theory means? Like, what does that mean to us, to people who are not familiar with what that means? Like,
Yeah.
people might be feminist or intersectional, but what is intersectional? Anyway,
No,
please.
that's great. Thank you for highlighting that. I think it's so important to define too, because you could have two scholars in the room and they might have differences in nuance as well. So my understanding and the way that I lead with intersectional feminists, just based on what I've learned and what I've seen, is that intersectional, first, it stems from Kimberly Crenshaw, and she is the scholar, the lawyer, the wonderful person who coined this term. And of course, it has its origins beyond. Like, I know the Combahee River Collective first discussed this concept, I believe. And intersectionality recognizes the interconnectedness. So, how different identities are experienced simultaneously. Like, for me, as a Sri Lankan person, I am light skinned, I am Sri Lankan, I identify more so as non-binary, but also as a woman. So just like how I can't separate these things. I don't appear in a room and pick and choose which identities I am. I'm all of those things simultaneously, and these create unique experiences for me, or unique ways in which society also perceives me. So for example, intersectionality originated, I believe the context was a case where Black women were discussing how they experience racism in a distinct way from Black men and from white women, because they are Black and they are women. And they can't separate those things. They can't just pick to be a woman and then not Black. You have those joint identities, and that leads to different oppressions, that leads to being oppressed on two levels instead of one or multiple levels. And that's where intersectional comes from, an intersectional feminist. And the feminist isn't just advocating for women, it's to advocate for the liberation, the equity, the justice, the joy for all marginalized people. It's more so, I like to think of it as seeing the humanity in all of us and
Mhm.
wanting the best for all of us. And oftentimes it's misconstrued as feminism only being for women, but feminism cares about, like, true intersectional feminism cares about everyone and wants everyone to lead fulfilling lives and not experience, racism or sexism or hate on any level of, identity or anything.
That is a really, really great definition. I've been I've been defending what definism means for decades, and that's a beautiful way that you described it, and that also the intersectionality of like simultaneously experiencing more could be several identities at once, and how you not only how you experience but how you perceive. Well, very beautiful to hear. And I often think of, if I have to have a short answer at a real quick time, I say feminism is for the love of everyone. It's to uplift make life better for everyone, regardless of who you are or how. But your definition is far more beautiful and thorough.
I feel like I must be with my major. The pressure feels high to try and live up to all the learnings, and I know I'm missing some of the details even then, but
Oh,
I hope
that's
that
good.
gives some foundation.
And there was a third topic that you wanted to bring up. Is it coming to you right now?
I think it was just the imposter
Yeah.
syndrome, and that is
Yeah.
again connected with it. Well, it can be with the model minority, my experiences as a South Asian person, and also being first generation. My Both of
Mm.
my parents are immigrants from Sri Lanka, and my mom, I am so proud of her, got her bachelor's this year and is currently pursuing her master's. But in seeing kind of that, seeing the contrast oftentimes, like going into a UC, being the first of my immediate family to do so, my siblings went to state universities, and my mom and my dad did as well. And seeing how even being like considered a legacy child, so having your parents attend these prestigious universities or the same university as you, and seeing the knowledge that that produces and passes down through generations, and knowing that for me it was a little bit different, and that I even learned English differently. Like I grew up saying vegetable or vegetable or something along those lines, and being corrected just for my English because I have immigrant parents who have different pronunciations. And I learned English in coordination with Sinhala, which is one of the languages spoken by Sri Lankans. And I felt like graduation was also a different experience for me. There was this deep imposter syndrome for me as, again, like an Asian person, not living up to the model minority that I should be, this expectation that I should have graduated maybe 10 years ago and have gotten like a 4.7 GPA and done all of these things, and that I should be more subservient, and knowing that I'm coming into my voice and I want to be an advocate and engage in this line of work has been such an interesting experience and revelation for me, I think. And I think imposter syndrome is just such a pervasive
Mm.
feeling that I've noticed amongst my peers, regardless of their backgrounds. And in seeing how cruel our society can be at times, like in seeing the job market and seeing how people with masters and PhDs can even stumble upon these job postings where they demand so much of these qualifications but will pay you barely anything, like barely like a minimum wage or living wage. And it's mind-boggling to me, like just yesterday I was looking at those job postings and it said a master's only to pay 36,000 in, like San Francisco. That is not livable. That did not seem right. And I know that's not representative, but I might have spiraled out from imposter
Oh
syndrome.
no, it's all relevant, and it all matters. And yeah, that I'm glad you wanted to talk about that, because it's I think it is, what's the word? It's occurring to a lot of people. A lot of people suffer the imposter syndrome without knowing it or without having a name for it. So it's great to just kind of put it on the table and pull it out. And you said you feel like a lot of your peers are suffering from imposter syndrome too, regardless of their background.
Yeah, I think in a lot of college students that I would speak to, just like my peers in my classes and around campus, they would feel like they weren't doing enough. And I think that's a thing that I hear way too much, where it feels like people don't think their rest is necessary, that their rest is well deserved, because in order to succeed and success is defined by money and like material markers. So they feel like they have to do more. They feel like they haven't made it and will never make it unless they achieve this mystical fantasy of the American dream and possibly become a billionaire. And it's tough because I see people so tired and so enticed by something that seems like it's not even all that it's made out to be.
Wow. Yeah, that's tough. Well, let me ask you, and this is a nice way where we're at the point where we need to make our closing thoughts. We just have a couple minutes left for the show. The time flew by for me. So I would love to hear from you. What are you going to do to rest and to celebrate yourself and to rejuvenate? And what would be an ideal thing for you, like a feasible, thing that you will do to like really be able to actually celebrate fully? Like what would be a full way to celebrate your whole self, separate from the university? But because this is a big, huge landmark moment that you're in, and you are clearly brilliant. And but what can you do to like rest and rejuvenate and relax right now at this time in your life?
I think two things popped into my head. So one, just going on walks, because I like feeling connected and hearing my footsteps and looking at the world and not having all these screens in front of me, and feeling the beauty of everything and feeling all of everything, if that makes sense. And the second is cooking. I have such a deep love of food and for food, just due to the beautiful cultural practices and meanings. But I think rest for me would be walking and also cooking.
That's wonderful. And is your family nearby? Are your parents or siblings nearby you?
I'm from SoCal, so my entire family is in SoCal right now, and I'm in Davis. So almost.
Okay. Well, there's always cooking over Zoom or FaceTime or something. I know it's healing for me also to cook with family. But that's beautiful. I'm glad you're going to take walks. I'm glad you're going to cook. It sounds like you have beautiful traditions. I so appreciate. I celebrate you. I celebrate your brilliance. I want to stay in touch. I'd love to hear more about how you are going to celebrate yourself and what's going to happen next for you. And thanks for this time. And it's my turn to like thank everybody else who's like been listening, the listeners and the viewers. I also like to thank our sound engineer, Rebel, and our producer, Dean Piper, and Sandy Holman, who brought Tushani into my awareness, and thank your family for raising such an incredible human being. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Talk4TV or W4CY.com. And may we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.